who may have given food involuntarily to the left-wing guerrillas. They were relatives of left-wing guerrillas.
There was a lot of indoctrination and trying to get signatures. The pressure was mainly on uneducated women who had family, someone from the family who was with the guerrillas. There were 85-year-old women with us and lots of children whose parents or one parent had been with the guerrillas at some point or was suspected to be with the guerrillas. Then woken up very early in the morning and taken to the theater and had speeches, and everybody said, now we are going to kill you, or you have to sign or you die, and so on.
The huge number of conscripts to the government army who were considered politically unreliable were now sent to the island camp of Makronissos. The torture squads of Makronissos were notorious.
Επιστρατεύτηκα το 1947 ως στρατιώτης εθνοφρουρός.
I was conscripted in 1947 as a soldier in the National Guard. And within 4 days, I was sent to Makronissos, simply because I had been in the resistance.
Εγώ συγκεκριμένα έκανα 6 μήνες στρατιώτης, μετά με πήγαν.
I was a soldier for 6 months.
Μακρόνισσο.
And then I was sent to Makronissos.
Πράγμα το δικό μου που ήμουν εγώ.
There were 8,500 of us. And life was unbearable.
Που η ζωή υπήρξε αφόρητη.
We would be without water for a week, a whole week.
Κάθε βράδυ 12.
Every night at midnight, Makronissos was full of moans and cries. Some men were killed and thrown into the sea. And the authorities would say they committed suicide.
Μέσα σε αυτό το χώρο των 10 χιλιόμετρων χωρέσανε 9 στρατόπεδα.
There were 9 re-indoctrination camps, as they called them.
Κακοποίησης της προσωπικότητας του ανθρώπου.
The system operated to wipe out any individuality and dignity or self-respect that you had.
Δηλαδή της υπογραφής δηλώσεων μετανοίας.
They tried to force the thousands of men gathered in barracks all over the island to renounce their beliefs.
Που είχαν συγκεντρωθεί στο διάστημα αυτό στα διάφορα στρατόπεδα.
The worst thing of all was that we were tortured by former Hellas partisans who had been broken and signed a confession.
Διαλέγανε αυτούς που είχαν υποκύψει και τους βάζανε για να εξηλωθούν.
These men got clean discharge papers in exchange for torturing the former comrades. These tortures had no beginning and no end. It was terrible.
In September 1947, the Greek government offered amnesty to any partisan who would surrender. Few did. In December, the Communist Party announced the formation of an alternative government in the mountains. So the Greek government outlawed the communists. The battle lines were drawn. The partisans continued to hold their own, although outnumbered 8-1. Aside from the fighting, they also began to organize life in the territory under their control.
Το Γενάρη του 1948.
In January 1948, the provisional government set up a teachers' training school here.
Άνοιξε αυτό το σχολείο η διδασκαλική ακαδημία.
There were about 60 or 70 of us training to teach the children in the various village schools. We were given tuition morning and afternoon in the different teaching methods and in the courses we were to teach. When we finished the training, we were each sent to a village school.
The countryside was under their control. They'd reopened the schools, they ran a newspaper, they ran an officers' training establishment. They had artillery practice and everything you can think of, really.
Throughout this period, the United Nations had a fact-finding mission in Greece. Its job was to investigate the extent to which the partisans were being aided by communist parties outside Greece, as the Americans believed.
Well, the Greek guerrilla effort, which originally we estimated around 7,000, and which never got over 20, was obviously a minority which had been organized and directed from bases in Yugoslavia and Albania and Bulgaria. It was not an indigenous Greek organization. It was the appendage of a communist organization.
Η βοήθεια στο Δημοκρατικό στρατό τώρα ήταν βέβαια ελάχιστη και φυσικά
the aid the partisan army got was minimal. Of course it was better than nothing. It was valuable, but we have very little ammunition or food.
Ελάχιστα τρόφιμα από τα πυρομαχικά αυτά. Να φανταστείτε ότι ήταν και ο οπλισμός που παίρναμε.
The arms we did get were old.
Ήταν παλιός οπλισμός, λάφυρα πολεμικά.
Usually they have been captured from the Germans during the war.
Λάφυρα γερμανικά και πολλές φορές, ιδιαίτερα
our machine gunners often had problems because the ammunition was all different makes and didn't fit the machine guns. And they had to make endless different combinations in order to be able to use them at all against the government army.
Για να πετύχουν, ας πούμε, μια βολή εναντίον του αντιπάλου.
The UN Commission was hopelessly divided along Cold War political lines.
They arrived, most of them, with their views already known and their prejudices just to be confirmed. This was especially evident with the Russians, the Poles, and the Yugoslav and Bulgarian liaison officers who were attached to the commission. They were on the revolutionary side. The other side disassociated themselves, and this was most of all evident when we went off to look at Marcos's headquarters and to interview Marcos. We didn't succeed in doing that because we fetched up in a little village about 2 miles away from the place where from government territory, and Marcos, I think, was 5 or 6 days away, and the American, British and other representatives refused to go further. The Russians said they would go on. So the commission broke up there. One part went off to see Marcos and the other part, my part, went home.
In the villages, both armies sought information on the other's activities. On both sides, the punishment for informing was usually death. The partisans instituted a system of people's courts.
Όταν μια υπόθεση για κάποιον που συνεργάστηκε με τον αντίπαλο.
When a case about someone informing on the partisans came before a people's court or a military court, there was proper justice. There had to be sufficient proof.
Στοιχεία στα χέρια της δικαιοσύνης, της λαϊκής δικαιοσύνης.
And naturally these courts did pass the death sentence on some people and execute them.
Την εκτέλεση.
As the brutality of the civil war spread, thousands of people were made homeless, families divided.
Ο πατέρας μου ήταν στρατιώτης, υπηρετούσε στο στρατό.
My father was conscripted into the government army. He was on the opposite side to my mother and myself.
Ο πατέρας μου τακτικά ερχόταν στο χωριό.
He risked his life by coming to visit us in the village every night because we were a close-knit family.
Γιατί ήμασταν, αποτελούσαμε μια...
He loved us very much, but he had to do his 2 years military service in the government army.
Ήταν υποχρεωμένος όμως να υπηρετήσει τη θητεία του.
Sometimes, in the morning, he'd still be with us, and he'd have to hide in the granary until the next night, when he could rejoin the government army unnoticed.
Να πάει απέναντι στο στρατό.
Πότε από εδώ χτυπούσανε, πότε από εκεί και ήτανε...
We were caught in the middle. The army used to attack from either side of the village. One of my brothers went with the partisans. A lot of boys from here, aged about 17, 18, 19, went too. Often their fathers were already with the partisans. In 1948, some were forced to join. They would ask you, why don't you join? Are you on the other side? That's how it happened.
The government relocation program was successful. Villages were deserted. Deprived of volunteers, the partisans too began conscription.
When the partisans realized they needed more forces, the older people were put to work, baking. And us, the younger ones, were given guns. I was given a Stain gun.
And they trained us for 15 days in the snow, with hardly anything to eat. And then we took part in the battles.
Τα δύο αδέρφια μου και εγώ, μένα μας επιστράτευσαν τότε.
My eldest brother was a volunteer. My other two brothers and myself were conscripted. We went to a village where we were trained for a month.
Και μάχες είχαμε.
Then we were split into units, and we took part in the battles.
Throughout this period, there had been a long tactical argument on the partisan side between the army chief, Markas Vafiadis, who favored a guerrilla war, and the Communist Party leader, Zachariadis, who wanted the partisans to switch to conventional tactics. Zachariadis won.
Εμένα τον Αύγουστο με καθαίρεσαν από την ηγεσία.
In August, I was expelled from the leadership because we had been arguing since 1947 about partisan strategy and tactics.
Και η διαφωνία μας βασικά ήταν αυτή. Η στρατηγική, η τακτική μας ποια θα πρέπει να είναι.
Zachariadis kept insisting that we were an army and so should adopt conventional and army tactics.
Θα πρέπει να εφαρμόσουμε.
And he was saying that at a time when we didn't even have a place to rest our heads. I took the opposite view, that we were a partisan army and that one day we might become a regular army. But at that time, we certainly weren't. That was our difference.
Αυτή ήταν η διαφορά μας.
Για μένα, κακός. Για μένα δηλαδή προσωπικά το λέω.
I think the leadership handled this issue very badly. It happened while we were right in the midst of the struggle. It really shouldn't have happened. And I think it was one of the main reasons why we were defeated later.
Είναι και από αυτό.
A few months later, in the autumn of 1948, the government army launched Operation Summit on Mount Gramos. It was the beginning of a number of set-piece battles in which the partisans were outnumbered 12-1. Under American pressure, the government pilots now used a new and terrible weapon, napalm.
Αλλά από την άλλη πλευρά άρχισαν τώρα να βομβαρδίζουν το χωριό.
They started bombing the village with about 8 or 10 planes each time. The first time they bombed us, they aimed at the church and the school. When they came overhead, all 150 school children ran out of the school in a panic, crying. And some of us hid in the sewer under this plane tree.
Όλη μέρα είχαμε ρηπό. Τα νύχτα μόλις νύχτωνε, κατεβαίναμε κάτω, φτιάναμε χερά όλη νύχτα.
In the daytime, we rested and slept. As soon as it got dark, we went down the mountain and worked through the night, building defenses. One evening, we'd gone to camouflage them, and an officer came and told us to go back up the mountain. We did, and as daylight broke, the smoke and the bombs started. Bam, boom, smoke everywhere. Virgin Mary. Airplanes, artillery, shells, mitrailleurs, automatic weapons. It was the end of the world. The end of the world. The partisans had mined the river, and as soon as the government army crossed it, the mines went off. The mountain erupted. The whole mountain was trembling. There was smoke and fire everywhere. The partisans were crossing the river with knives between their teeth. They'd go to the machine gun positions and attack. But the government soldiers kept returning with reinforcements. They had airplanes too. The partisans had nothing. Then we started retreating, going further and further back. And then, after the ceasefire, the men said, "Let the women go down." So we went. And there was a guard from each army standing either side. I saw someone lying face down with his leg cut off, and I said to both the guards, "Get lost, both of you. So you've taken over the hill. What's the good of it?" So many young people killed, mothers who will cry and suffer so much. And the army guard said, "This is war, my fellow fighter. What can we do?" I said, "You fools."
Τα αεροπλάνα καθημερινά δηλαδή ήταν ο κίνδυνος που αντιμετωπίζαμε.
Things were so bad we had to keep a sense of humor. For instance, the reconnaissance plane that always came very early in the morning, we nicknamed the milkman. The next plane, we call it the barrel plane, because it dropped barrels full of napalm, which set the whole area on fire.
There were 17,000 casualties in Operation Summit. For the government army, it was a strategic failure. The partisans returned to the Vitzi mountains and held their ground. Morale was still high. Nevertheless, the bombing of their area, coupled with the fact that the government had emptied all the villages, confronted the communist leadership with difficult decisions about what to do with the civilian population under their control. They decided to evacuate the children to Albania. They said they had no alternative. But at the United Nations, the Greek government claimed the children were being forcibly separated from their parents so they could be brought up as devout communists.
I had a small girl. We were fired on from the mountains with artillery, and the soldiers accused us of hiding partisans. It was treachery. We were supposed to have done this or that. We didn't know what was going on. People were butchered right here, in the village square, and the children saw it all. The partisans were forced to form a committee to take the children away from here.
The army had taken up positions facing us, and were firing continually. Each time we moved, they opened fire. Many of us got killed. Young people, children, and women were killed in the bombardments from the government army planes. Then in 1948 and 49, when things reached the worst point, we started leaving. From our village, the children were the first to go. Children from partisan families who had been left here alone with their aunties, whose parents were both partisans or had been killed on one side or the other. They went to Albania.
When I was 5.5, I lost the two most important things in life, my parents and my country. I followed the defeated, and I saw things I would never have seen if I'd stayed here in Greece. I went with my mother and my little brother to Albania.
The children left because they were terrified of the planes. Our village was bombarded. I had great difficulty finding the children in the evenings. They'd fled wherever they could. I was hiding in the fields myself. The children wanted to leave. My eldest daughter wanted to go, but I wouldn't let her. What would I have done all alone?
You should have seen what it was like. Mothers and children crying as they parted, like baby lambs parting from their mothers. We let the children go. What could we do? I kept my youngest daughter with me, and every morning she asked me, "Where can I hide today?"
170 children left. They went past Marcos and began to sing. We were laughing and crying at the same time. We cried to see so many children leaving. The village was deserted. There was not a single child to help the priest in church.
In 1949, there were still about 20,000 armed partisans, 1 in 5 of whom were women. The government army had 263,000 soldiers, backed by American advisors and officers of the newly formed CIA. The civil war was approaching its climax in the mountains of Gramos.
Κοιτάξτε τώρα πόσο σοφά θα λέγαμε.
Look how well the government army planned its attack on Gramos. They cut off the back of our Gramos unit. They started clean-up operations from Rumeli. They advanced to Thessaly and destroyed the Kosaga command. So there was no hope for a large partisan unit to help another by coming from behind or by carrying out any serious diversionary operations.
The odds against the partisans were overwhelming in both men and equipment. In desperation, they formed whole units of wounded men.
They were made up of people who wouldn't have been allowed in any army. They would have been sent home. Invalids, people with multiple wounds, who couldn't take part in any offensive operations. Their job was to stay in the trenches and man the machine guns. Even their retreat was a problem. These units tell you just how desperate the situation of the partisan army was.
The government army launched Operation Torch. The Greek High Command was so confident it invited King Paul and his entourage to have a grandstand view of the final defeat of the left.
We helped carry the stretchers. To tell you the truth, we had no bread. We were so hungry. It was very foggy and pouring with rain. And we were told to go and collect an injured government army officer who was still alive. But as we approached him, what happened? He started to fire at us. The officer, firing at us. I was with two partisan women, one of whom was called Flora. We decided to lie down. But the officer still kept firing at us. So we threw stones at him. Two of us had brain guns. It was such a medley in all the folk. Government soldiers on one side of us, partisans on the other. Then another soldier went up to the officer. He was Flora's brother. And then she saw him. She called him, and he recognized her voice and shouted, "Flora." And just as he shouted her name, the wounded officer shot him. He killed Flora's brother. You should have seen her. She threw herself on the officer. We killed him. We tore him to pieces. He was a huge man. Then we left the place, and we took Flora's brother with us, even though he was in the government army, and we buried him.
It was night time. We always walked at night because in the day we would get fired at. Finally, we reached the Albanian border. The army was advancing, our brothers from one side and from the other. I had brothers in the government army fighting against us. We didn't know what to do. We had no choice.
They managed to capture us all together, because of course they had the arms, tanks, planes, everything, while we didn't have even a tank. It was true that we had no shelter at all. We were on our own. And it was our leadership's fault, because they had made us all gather in Vitsi and Gramos. That's why we were defeated and had to cross over into the People's Republics.
Εμείς φύγαμε γιατί δεν μπορούσαμε να μη φύγουμε.
We left because our choice was get killed, give ourselves up, or leave Greece.
Λοιπόν, είχαμε πάρει εντολή να υποχωρήσουμε.
Orders were given to retreat to the Albanian border.
Προς τα αλβανικά σύνορα.
It was obvious we couldn't hold the mountain any longer. So we thought we would move and reappear somewhere else in Epirus, probably in the Murgana. But when we crossed the frontier, we were told to put our guns in a heap, and the Albanian army personnel collected them. It was then that we realized that the war was being stopped for a while. Later, we went aboard ships, but we didn't at first know where we were going. Eventually, we arrived in the Soviet Union, and then we realized that it would be a long time before we would return to Greece, without, of course, realizing that it was going to take so many years.
In Athens, the government celebrated its victory, but 100,000 Greeks had died in the civil war. The left had lost. Its supporters in Greece were in prison, and those who fled abroad were to spend the next 30 years in exile.
The civil war was fought for democracy. But there are people who are greedy. Let them burst from their greed. Democracy will come one day.
Παρακολουθήσατε τον Κρυφό, τον κρυμμένο πόλεμο. Ένα ντοκιμαντέρ βρετανικό προβλήθηκε πριν από 20 χρόνια στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία και έκτοτε πρωτοφανές απαγορεύτηκε να ξαναπροβληθεί, να πωληθεί στο εξωτερικό και οι κόπιες του καταστράφηκαν, καθώς επίσης και το αυθεντικό, το αρχικό υλικό. Βρήκαμε την μοναδική κόπια που έχει απομείνει και σας την παρουσιάζαμε σήμερα το βράδυ σε αυτή την ειδική θεματική βραδιά για τα 60 χρόνια από την έναρξη του εμφυλίου πολέμου. Τώρα σειρά έχει ένα άλλο ντοκιμαντέρ, έχει προβληθεί παλιότερα στο ρεπορτάζ Χωρίς Σύνορα από την αντίσταση στον εμφύλιο πόλεμο. Η ματιά της αριστεράς για τα γεγονότα που συγκλώτησαν την Ελλάδα 60 χρόνια πριν. Let the might of your to the flowing stream. Κυρίες και κύριοι, γεια σας. Από τις αρχές της χρονιάς έχουμε ξεκινήσει μια προσπάθεια να βγάλουμε ορισμένα διδάγματα από τον αιώνα που πέρασε. Να μάθουμε από τα λάθη της ανθρωπότητας, ώστε τον καινούργιο αιώνα να μην επαναλάβουμε τα ίδια λάθη. Τον Ιανουάριο ασχοληθήκαμε με τον πόλεμο του Βιετνάμ. Είδαμε τα μεγάλα σφάλματα των Αμερικανικών κυβερνήσεων, πώς οι ΗΠΑ διολύθησαν σε ένα πόλεμο που στοίχησε εκατομμύρια ζωές. Από την περασμένη εβδομάδα έχουμε ξεκινήσει μια καινούργια σειρά για το πολιτικό κίνημα που σφράγισε τον 20ο αιώνα, τον κομμουνισμό. Το προηγούμενο επεισόδιο ήταν αφιερωμένο στα ρομαντικά χρόνια, στα όνειρα των πρώτων κομμουνιστών για ένα καλύτερο κόσμο, στις προσπάθειες των σοβιετικών ανθρώπων, αλλά και στα μεγάλα εγκλήματα του Στάλιν. Η σημερινή μας εκπομπή εξετάζει μια περίοδο γεμάτη ηρωισμούς και τραγωδίες, την αντίσταση και τον εμφύλιο στην Ελλάδα.
Ein Sowjetzeichen soll er vor sich hertragen und wir werden mit unserem Zeichen wieder siegen.
Η πολεμική μηχανή του Χίτλερ έμοιαζε ανίκητη. Το 1940, αφού προηγουμένως είχαν κατακτήσει την Τσεχοσλοβακία και την Πολωνία, οι Γερμανοί επιτέθηκαν στη Δύση. Μέχρι τα μέσα του 1941 είχαν καταλάβει τη Γαλλία, το Βέλγιο, την Ολλανδία, την Νορβηγία, τη Δανία, τη Ιουγκοσλαβία και την Ελλάδα.